Welcome back. I'm Chris Sikora, and I'm going to step you through exercise 3 in Creo 6.0. Now in this exercise, as you can see up on the screen here, we actually have a forged ratchet body. I just painted it red inside the software, and just so it could highlight some of the features. But as you can see, we're going to build this starting at the head, and we're going to build in these details that you can see there. We have a recess, we have a pocket, we have some through holes. There's going to be draft as well, or what they call taper in here, and that's so it can pull out of the mold properly. We're going to build this transition section by offsetting a plane from the top plane down below it about 4 inches. And then we're going to draw this handle, which is going to be a rectangle. It's going to be centered. We're going to extrude it with a taper on it as well. And then we'll go ahead and engrave text onto it. So let's begin. Start with a new part file and go ahead and label this E3 and hit OK. Now, the training guides are available if you go to V as in Victor, ER, T as in Tom, A, N as in Nancy, UX1.com. And then just go to instructional manuals, and you could click on the Creo Parametric 6.0 Basics. And that will bring up this training guide. And we're starting off here on page 31. And we're going to build this profile that you see here. And we're going to extrude it and do some neat things. So let's go ahead and we'll get started here. So first of all, let's start on the front plane. And we're going to go right to extrude. And we talked about this and how Creo enables you to go start a sketch first, or go right to the extrude, and then it will start a sketch for you. And then there's some options where basically it easily goes to the extrude once you apply it. So let's give that a try, the extrude. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to draw in a line. And right at the origin, click and drop a small line. Oops, let me just try that again. Click here. Drag up a line. Middle click 2 times. You'll see the dimension there. Go ahead and change that dimension. We want to go ahead and make that 1 inch. And this is just to scale it. And now you could hit refit up here, or the F key if you've set that up. Now remember, you could squeeze this in even further and hit refit again. All right, now that line is really just to scale, so we don't really even need it. But what we could do, rather than delete it, you could click on it, and we can render it innocuous. So click on it, and then just right here, change it to construction, or Shift-G will do the same thing. All right, and don't worry about the dimension. We're not really interested in that. We'll just leave it there. It's not going to have any effect. So now we could go to the centerline tool, and at that origin, click at the bottom there and drag it straight up, middle click 2 times. Also, you might notice I turned off my plane. So right here, you could turn off all these tools if you don't feel you need them. Remember, we could always turn them back on too. Okay, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit with the wheel. I'm going to go to the line tool. And now down here, I'm going to click and drag a little angled line away from the origin. Now, don't worry too much about these dimensions that are appearing there. What we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and mirror this across first, and then we'll put our own dimensions in after we put the round on there. So go to the mirror tool and select the vertical center line, and it should mirror it across. Now, if you didn't have the mirror tool available, that would be an indicator that you might have hit escape or the middle mouse button a couple times too many. And so that was no longer selected. But if you select it, see right now it's gray. This is only if you don't have it. You click on that and see it activates that. And we learned about that last week, so there should be nothing really new there, but it's just review. All right, now that we have these 2 angled lines, let's now go to the 3-point tangent ends. Go ahead and select that. Now click on this vertex. Make sure you get the blue square and go up and around. Now be wary of going directly across because you're not going to get the tangent arc that you're hoping for. And I want to show you this. Go over the top and then all the way around. Don't stop at the middle. Go and make sure you get this point here. Click. Let's try that again. Start in this point here, down and around, and hook it and attach it. Now you can middle click 2 times. Now the dimensions that appear here, we're in good shape. Let's go ahead and change this first top one to, let's see, 0.75. Okay, now it's going to get a little bit large. That's okay. Now double click on the bottom one, change it to 0.6, and now go to dimension. Now you have to be very careful how you select these. You want to find the center point of the bottom arc. So just hovering over the arc itself, you'll see the center point will highlight for a moment. You could go ahead and click on that. Now you got to find the center point of this arc. So again, click. Now move your pointer directly to the right. And remember to drop the dimension. You have the middle click, so the wheel, actually click on that. And the dimension should drop to the right. And let's make it 0.75. Okay, so we have that set to 0.75. Now middle click 2 times. Now what we can do here, you'll see that there's probably a little blue dimension, which means the weak dimension floating right here. We could double click on that and set that to 0. That will actually lock in the origin to, I should say, the center point of the bottom arc to the origin. Now, to me though, adding a dimension of 0 is kind of, it goes outside my boundary of comfort. So what I like to do instead is I actually like to use coincident, which is a constraint. Go to coincident, select that center point of the arc, and click on the center of the crosshairs there. And it should move it. It'll remove the dimension. You could hit escape. Now that 1-inch dimension that we have right here, if you want, you could click and drag over it and delete it, but you just have to be careful. I would just go ahead and leave it. In fact, maybe even just delete the dimension itself by clicking on it, make it a weak dimension, just so no one thinks that there's actually anything there. If we could, we could go ahead and zero in and get that little line there. I'm afraid of deleting my center line though, so I'm not going to do that. Okay, so now we could hit OK, and you'll see it will extrude. And let's go ahead and extrude that 0.5. And now go to the options and go ahead and select Add Taper. Now we want a taper on here, which is going to add angles on the sides. And it's going to enable it to pull out of mold, because basically this is a forged ratchet body. It has a mold, and a hot ingot of steel gets placed in between the mold, and it gets squeezed together, and it fills in the mold. So we want to have, we're going to put 7 degrees. So actually put a -7 so it gets smaller. Hit enter and hit OK. Now note, some students, you feel free to try this. It doesn't work on this release. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to work on 7 either yet. But some students want to go ahead and have it changed on both sides. Unfortunately, the draft, as they call it, or taper, it's constant through here. So you can't do that just yet. But just hit the green check mark, hit OK. Now you could go to the mirror tool while it's still selected, select the back face, and it will mirror it across, and it should look like this. Now if it's reversed, like where it's inverted, that's not going to pull from the mold. So what happened, you might have selected the wrong face. You might have selected that face in error. And what you do, you could cancel this and try it again, or hit the undo button, try it again to mirror it. Maybe rewind the video and see how I did it the first time. Okay, now I'm going to hit OK here. Click. I'm going to go ahead and change my this to shading with edges. I'm going to select this face. I'm going to go to Extrude, and now I want to make a recess for a cover plate, which is going to house where the gear is and also the clicking element. So to do this, we could go to Offset. And you'll see the type, they're single, chain, and loop. Go ahead and select loop, and then that way you could just select the whole face. And hopefully the arrow is pointing inward. You see that arrow. If it's not, you have to type in a negative number here. But if it's pointing inward, we don't need to. We just type 0.125 and hit enter, and you'll see now there's actually the profile. Now we could go ahead and hit OK and rotate this a little bit, flip the direction of this arrow. Okay, you could have done it here too. Now look at this, it went to remove material, so it's cutting that, and that's what we want. That's using the AI there. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and make this 0.125 deep and hit OK. All right, now we're going to make the recess. So that was the recess. We're going to make the pocket now. So select this face, go to Extrude, and go to the circle tool. Now this bottom center is easy to find. Oh, let's try that again. Drag this circle out, middle click. Now to wake up this center point for this arc, notice it doesn't appear. Here's the trick. You just hover over the edge of the arc. Oh, let me go back to circle here. There we go. And I didn't click now. I just hovered over the edge and you'll see that the center point then appears. Click and drag that out and intersect it into this circle down below. Click. I'll middle click 2 times. You'll see there's diameters here. Let's change the top one to 1. And let's change the bottom one to 0.7. Now we need to trim out this excess material. So go to delete segment and scribble through both sides just like that. Now middle click and let's arrange these so they look a little bit better. Oops, grab those dimensions and lay them out like so. Hit OK, rotate, flip it with the arrow, and change this to 0.75 and hit the green check. All right, so we have our pocket. Now, if there's any confusion as which feature is which on the feature tree here, or the model tree, this is what you could do. Like the Extrude one, as you click on it, you can see the outside highlight in green. Wait a second and click another time. Now, go ahead and label that HEAD for head. Now, Extrude 2, click once, wait a second, click again, and call that the recess, R-E-C-E-S-S. Now, click on the Extrude 3, wait a second, click a second time, and let's call that the pocket. Now, beware you don't have to do that step. But imagine if you had thousands of features on a model. You could do this for certain features just to highlight ones that are of importance rather than having to scan through the whole feature tree. Okay, now that we have that, let's go ahead and select this face, go to Extrude, and we're going to put in some through holes here. So go to Circle, and right at the bottom here, click, drag out a circle. Now, again, the trick to locating here, just hover over this edge, locate the circle there. Now get this one to go with the auto equal, which again, this is why I don't always turn it off, because it is kind of nice to have that auto equal there. Middle click, and here this one, change it to 0.35 for the through holes. Now we could hit OK, flip the direction, and instead of stopping it, remember the day one we talked about design intent, we know these are going to be through, so let's have it always go through. So extrude to intersect with all surfaces. Hit OK. All right, now we're going to add some rounds on these edges. So let's go to the round tool. Make sure the setting for the round tool is 0.125. Select this edge right here and this edge down here. Just those two. Hit OK. All right, so the head is pretty much done. Now let's turn on the plane display. Now this plane right here, the top plane, we want to offset. So click on it and you should get the plane tool, or hit P, and you can see it's extruding, or it's actually moving a copy of it, or offsetting it I should say. In this case they're calling it translating 4 inches. Now we actually want it to be -4, so you can type in -4 here. Yours might be different. Yours might not be set to 4. The only reason why it's 4 is because I just modeled this and it remembered it. So hit enter. So -4 for it to go down. We could have grabbed the point and dragged it down too. We would have gotten that little ruler and we could have locked it in. But go ahead and hit OK. And now we have that plane floating down there. Let's go ahead and select the edge of that plane. Go to Extrude. And let's rotate that a little bit so you can see what's going on. I'm going to rotate it so you can see this. There's the crosshairs. Let's go to the circle tool. Get to the center of those crosshairs. Click, drag out a circle, middle click, and make that a 1/2 inch diameter. Now we can hit OK. It's extruding, but let's have it extrude up to next, so which is basically this, up to next surface. And hit OK. Now notice the up to next, it just stops when it reaches the other surface and merges with it. It doesn't go through anything. So if you were to select through all, it would go through the part. We don't want that. Let's now select the front plane for the handle and go to Extrude. And just so we're all in the same view, click over here. Up, no, wrong one, sorry. Click here. Go to Front. All right. Now, I'm going to go to the rectangle tool. Now, there's several ways you could do what I'm about to show you. I just want to show you the flexibility of the sketches for conceptual design. Draw out a little rectangle. So I went to corner rectangle. I drew it off to the side here. This is for the handle. Now, we could actually set these dimensions. So this is going to be 4 inches for the length of the handle. It's going to be 1 inch wide. And then offset from the origin, 3.75. Now, you might be wondering, why 3.75? Why not 4? Well, remember, we're having a taper put on there, and the taper starts at the overall length, and if we locked it into the bottom, we would have this little point coincident to that shaft. So you have to dig it in a little bit so we don't accidentally have it like that. Okay, now you can see there's a dimension here, which we're not interested in. Let's go to center line and find the midpoint. Click, drag it straight up, middle click again, and now we could go ahead and go to coincident, select the center line here to the center here. And it should jog it over, and now we have it located. We could hit OK. We want to extrude this 0.375 for the height, and we want a taper on it, so don't forget the options. Add taper of -7, and it should list it right there. If you hit the little arrow, it should remember from last time. So -7. And hit OK. Rotate it around. Let's select that feature. Go to, notice mirror isn't available, so select it from the model tree. Mine is Extrude 7 for the handle. Go to mirror and select this face over here, and it should mirror it over. Hit OK. Now I'm going to turn off those planes. I don't like to have model all the time, so I'm going to turn off plane display right here. I'm going to go to round, and 0.125 is the default. This edge, this edge on the back, and rotate to get that one down there. So get those 4 edges. Now, sometimes I have students select the parting line edge. You could do that, but I wouldn't bother. Just leave it sharp. Hit the green check. Now go to round again, and 0.06. Now select this edge here. Notice it doesn't span around because it's not tangent. This edge here. That one, oops, I accidentally got that face. So I'm going to hold Control and deselect it. I'm going to select this edge and this edge. And over here, this edge to that edge. And finally, I'm going to roll around to the bottom and this edge. Hit OK. We're going to put in the engraved text now. Now, for this engraved text, the lab that you're going to have right after this lab 3, you actually have engraved text on a radius. So in this case, it's just going to be straight, but you can apply the same technique. Select this face, go to Extrude, and if yours is vertical, no worries, it doesn't really matter in this case, just as long as you have spatial awareness of what you're looking at. Go to the line tool and hover right about there, click and drag this across. This is the line that's going to have our text on it. Now imagine you could draw an arc too. Now once you draw it, middle click twice, and then select it, and you should get this option to change it to construction geometry. You want that. That's going to render it innocuous for the extrude, but it will be the resting place for our text. The text is going to follow that line. So now we could go to the text tool, and on that line, click and drag this up. And we could go ahead and enter our text. I'll move this over here. And Creo uses any true type font that you might have in your directory for fonts on Windows. So here I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to specify, I'm going to go ahead and put in VERTANUX1. You can see it right there. We could adjust the aspect ratio, like squeeze it down. We could put a slant angle in it. Let's maybe spread it out a little bit more. Okay. This font 3D works really well. There's some other fonts in here that work well. Be aware if you have some unusual fonts, they don't always work, especially scripted fonts have challenges. And you could get them to work generally, you just might have to do them in segments, because what happens is the script, just like cursive writing, it's all continuous. When those different letters have intersections, that's where you have a problem. So if you put one letter in and then extrude it, then you could go ahead and put the next one next to it, and so far, and do the whole thing. So if you have to, you could get it to work generally. But anyhow, in this case, make sure none of them are touching. They're all a good distance away. I'm going to go to Omega Bold Italic and hit OK. And hit OK. Now, if you don't get a preview, that means it didn't like what you had. So you have to edit that text again. But in this case, if you want it embossed where it's raised, you would just put in like 0.02 for 20 thousandths in height. If you're going to engrave it, like a laser engraving is very small, so 0.003 or something. But I'm going to have it engraved a little bit deeper. I'm going to reverse it. Right here is the reverse switch. And I'm going to set it to 0.01, so 10 thousandths of an inch. And you can see the preview right there. Hit OK. And there we have our engraved text. All right. And if you wanted to paint it or do whatever you want, remember you could go to View, the appearances, like let's say I wanted this to be, I'll go with ceramic this time around. And I'm going to select part, select the part and hit the middle button. Now you could go to, I'm going to go with red paint. Red is my theme for this, this year, this release. I'm going to select that. I'm going to hold Control and select these guys. And these surfaces here. Middle click. And if you go over here, turn on perspective. And then you could also go to shading with reflections. Okay, now if that's a little too bright for you, pick something else. But if you want to photorealistically render it now, as we remember, you could go to Application and Render Studio, and it will photo render it. Now it's coming off the base like that. If I want it to lay flat on a table, you go to Scenes and go to Edit Scene and Environment and change this to the XY plane. And now it's resting on a table. You could close that. And of course, the longer you let it sit, the clearer the image is going to be. Okay, so don't forget to turn off real-time rendering when you're done with it. Quite honestly, the regular rendering using the graphics card is really impressive in this software. So as you can see here, I've been making my renderings just using this, quite honestly. Not everyone has a real-time rendering is amazing, though. You can do a lot of neat things with it. But Creo has a very neat way of real-time rendering these, so it's pretty cool. I should say not real-time, but using the graphics card. Okay, let's move on now. I'm going to go back to the training guide here. And the labs, there's 2 labs for today, and they're at the end of this chapter, so page 42 they start on. You can see here there's this like little keyway brass cover plate. And then there's this like L3B is like looks like a frisbee kind of thing, like a dish. So we'll take a look at these. Now this one here, I'm going to go ahead and download it. And this should give me the ability to rotate it. So once I click on it, and here's the rotate button. And that was like page 42. There we go. And we could see, now what's neat about this, the strategy. The strategy is like, look, it's very similar to the head of the ratchet that we built. But notice it has like this bigger radius and there's no tangency. It's sharp in these corners here and here. So the bottom's going to be tangent. And in fact, the dimension for the bottom's the same what we used for the head of the ratchet. Remember this strategy because in exercise 4, lab 4, I'm going to have you rebuild this similarly. It's a little bit more complex. But those of you who are, as I always recommend, I would hit pause now and try and give this a shot on your own, knowing what you know already. But once you do it, go back and watch my video and I'll show you some really neat techniques, even some that we haven't seen yet. I'm going to go ahead and move on with it. So let's get started. I'm going to move this over to my second screen, and I'm going to go now to New Part, and this will be L3 for Lab 3. And now I'm going to select the front plane, go to Extrude. I'm going to draw that line, and again, I want to draw a line that I could use for a reference, and in this case, it's only going to be, let's see, make it 2 inches in height. And now we could hit that refit. Now let's get in there a little closer. All right. Now I'm actually going to delete it. Click on it, hit delete. Now we could go to center line and rotate this. Now some of you, I've seen students just zoom up to it really close and do that. That little trick I'm showing you to scale it's not really a necessity. It just makes it a little bit easier on you, I feel, on new students. But there's different techniques. You can make different templates and things like that that eliminate the need to do it the way I'm showing you here. But go ahead and click and drag out a little line just like we did before. Make sure you go to center line, draw your vertical center line in over there. Now let's select this line here, go to mirror and select the vertical center line, and it should mirror it over. Again, ignore those dimensions down there because we're going to go to the tangent ends arc. Drag one over the top. Now, actually, this one isn't over the top. I'm going to hit escape. I'm going to do the one at the bottom first with tangent ends. Now, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go with, let's see. Oh, well, we could just do 3-point. Let me show you 3-point. 3-point, you go directly across. And now look at that. We get that, what looks kind of like a brain that you'd see on an alien from Star Trek. So, now we could go and change the dimensions here. So let's change this one first. And this one needs to be 1.5 inches, so 1.5. This bottom needs to be 0.6. And now we can add some of the other dimensions. So go to the dimension tool, dimension from this angle to this angle, and right in between the two, middle click, that's 35 degrees. And if you're having any difficulty adding these, by the way, try adding the dimensions or changing the dimension up above or below. Sometimes it's just squeezed too tight or for it to adapt. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and add the last one, which is the dimension between the center points. So here's the center point for the bottom arc. Here's the center point for the top arc. And to the right, middle click. And let me try that again. That didn't take. So here to here, middle click. Okay, there we go. And that's going to be 2 inches. And middle click again. Now remember this one, you could change this to 0. It will work. But that's beyond my comfort level. I like using coincident instead. So click on this point to this point there. And then we don't have that extra dimension. Just don't need it. You don't need a 0 dimension necessarily, but there are times when it's very useful. Okay, now we could hit OK. Let that extrude, and the depth of this is going to be, let's see, on the print 0.610. We didn't have to put the 0 in, but I did. Just 0.61 is fine. Now the taper, typical draft, is what we're looking for, and that's 16 degrees. So we have to go to Options, and taper minus 16. There we go. Hit OK. Now we're going to add the fillet. Now this goes kind of backwards from logic. When you're putting fillets in, or rounds as they call them here, be aware that depending upon where you add them, usually you start with the larger fillets and work your way down. 90% of the time, that's what you're going to find is a good way to do it. This one is the reverse, and it's because of this sharp edge. So we're going to put in this, the round in the front is 0.25. Select this edge right here. And now you could click on this edge, and this one is going to be 0.5. And there you can see what it just did. And I'm going to change this. I probably should change this more on a regular basis. Okay, now I'm going to punch through the hole to the top there. Oh, yeah, we could punch the hole through. So I'm going to select this face, start a sketch. I'm going to go to the circle tool. And remember, you can wake up that center. Oops, let's try that again. And then that hole is going to be 1 inch through. So hit OK. Flip the direction, and we're going to have it just go through all. Now the keyway, select this face, extrude. This is not through. And we could use that same technique we learned earlier, or we could try center rectangle here. So you could center a rectangle right about there, drag this out, just like that. Now you could change this width to 0.25. There's a lot of 0.25s coming up here, by the way. All right, and then the location, this needs to be set 0.25 offset from here. So 0.25 like that. Make sure that this extends. You could grab that and drag it out if you wanted. Make sure it just extends into the open area. Okay, and that pretty much does that. We can now hit OK, flip that direction, and again, only 0.25. And select Remove Material. Now this is where the expert system, or AI, I don't want to say it failed. It didn't fail, actually. It's just that there was part of it was solid, part of it was on nothing. So it obviously picked up, and it's adding material here. We want to select Remove Material, but most of the time it gets it right. Just in this case, this was partially on, partially off a solid. Hit OK. All right, the front, we're going to put in the engraved text. Select this face, go to Extrude. Now here is where we can use center and ends arc. So find the center point. So wake it up first, hover over that edge, then click here, drag this out a little bit offset, and click and drag an arc across like so. Now remember, that arc, we need to render it innocuous. So click on it and go right over here to construction. Now we could go to text, find that point, drag this out, make sure you get the perpendicular symbol, click, and go ahead, and I'm going to put in Cannon. Now you see it's not following the arc. That's because you have to go over here, place line curve, and select the curve. And I accidentally put in an exclamation. That needs to be a 1. All right, now it's rather large here. We could adjust the aspect ratio if you want to squeeze it in. Okay. We could put a slant in it. We could adjust the spacing. You could do a lot of different things. I'm just going to leave it like that and hit OK. And now hit OK. Now it's going to extrude that. Now remember, if you don't get it to extrude, that means you have to change something. All right, I'm going to I'm going to emboss this, so 0.01, and hit OK. And so now it's embossed. Now you could engrave it if you like. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and flip this around. I'm going to select this face, go to Extrude, and we want to offset the edges. This is not a shelled body. All right, so we're going to go to Offset, Loop, and select the face. And in this case, I'm not seeing the preview, so I'm going to hit Next until I see the outer edge. Now, it's picked a darker shade, so I think I've got it. I'm going to hit Accept. Oh, and it captured the inside. So the update color is not desirable on this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with chain instead. Select this edge, and hit Next. There, now we see the outside edge. And we can hit Accept, hit Yes, so it converts it. And we see the arrows pointing outward now, but we need to be in, and the offset on here needs to be, let's see, as I look at the print, 0.1. So minus 0.1 we're going to have to add. Hit Enter. It should be on the inside. All right, hit OK. Now it's going to extrude that, flip that direction, and again, because there was an opening there, the expert system didn't know to select remove material. It's only going to go a depth of 0.25, but we're not done yet. We have to add the taper so it matches the taper on the outside. Now some of you might say, well, why didn't we just shell this? This doesn't go all the way to the depth that we would normally have, the 0.610. It's only going 0.25 deep, consistent. So that's why we didn't choose that. All right, so here, add taper, and it should still have our minus 16 in there. Okay, actually it needs to be, let's put a minus again in front of it, because there we go. Quite honestly, if we would have left a positive 16, it would have worked that first time, but I double negatived it, so that's good, we got it. Hit the green check, and now what we can do is we can paint it. So we could go over here to View and Appearance, and we could set the actual to, let's find brass, PTC brass, and let's select part, click on the part, middle click, and now it's brass. Now if you really wanted that to be brass, like to where it identifies as brass, you could go over here to File, and Prepare, and Model Properties. And this would be to carry over for an analysis, perhaps, or if you want to find out how much it weighs. So right over here, the material is not assigned, so I'm going to hit Change. And let's see what legacy materials if we have. There's brass. Okay, click on it, hit OK. All right, and there it is. It's set to brass. Okay. And so later on, if we run an analysis, we would be able to identify that as there. Now, if we go to analysis, what we can find out, because we've selected brass, is how much does this weigh? So go to Mass Properties and preview it. And here we could actually see the mass, and the density, and surface area, and so on. All right. So we could find out how much it weighs. We could calculate, if we're going to make 1 million parts, how much brass we have to order. Now, also, while we're in the analysis tools, let's take a look. There's the measure tool. Hit the little arrow next to measure. You'll see there's a summary that's just like it has a little scale there. Length, distance, diameter. So let's say we want to check that diameter of that hole. Click on it. You can select like the edge. And there we see the diameter. Now, if we want to measure distance, let's say we want to measure this, we'll go over here, measure this distance, click. And then, oops, hold on a second. Here, let's do it for points. Click on this point to this point. Oops, let's hold Control. There we go. Holding Control enables you to see both. There we can see that's 0.25. All right, and there's angles, there's all sorts of tools in here. Area, so if you click on area, it'll tell you how much the area is. and volume, things like that. So this is really a nice little tool. There's the measure areas. There's other options in here too for checking draft and such. But that finishes that part. Now to save this, since we already gave it a name, do a save as. And this is what I recommend to my students. Save a backup. Now saving a backup, you just direct where you want to back it up to. So if I drop in my Creo, you don't have to rename it. When you go to backup, it's going to use the same name. So you don't have to rename that. And just go ahead and hit OK. And it will make a backup of that part, saving it. Currently, it's just in a general directory, which purges itself if you didn't do a backup or save. So just beware once you close it. And you could adjust that. You could change that. We're not going to go into that right now. My students, I generally don't want them to tinker with that inside the classroom. But we will go through that. Okay. The next model we want to build here is this one right here. So L3B, and it's a frisbee. But notice everything's at an angle, like they're parallel dimensions on angled edges. So we could see here it's 0.15 in overall height. And then the diameter, there's a hole that's 1 inch. And then we see that there isn't an overall diameter given. It's all given off of angles and such. So let's go ahead and draw this out. Go to File, New, Part, and go ahead and call this L3B. Select the front plane, and we'll go with Revolve. Now, remember, draw your center line where you want it to revolve around first. So click on the origin and draw a vertical center line, middle click. Now let's go to the line tool and add a little line right here at an angle, right off the base, middle click. And let's get a height set for that. So go to Dimension, select this point here to this point, and then just to the left, middle click, and that will be 1.5 and hit Enter. And we could zoom up to it, or we could hit Refit, middle click, bring that dimension in a little closer. Now this needs to be 1 inch, so double click here, change that to 1 inch, and then the angle, we have the angle there. Let's take a look at our print to see what that should be. That should be 25 degrees. So you see it's not 25 there, so we want to add a dimension. Click on that angled line. Oops, gotta zoom up to it first. Click, and then click on the vertical center line, and in between the two, middle click, 25 degrees. And let's move all these dimensions in a bit closer and hit Refit. Okay. Now we could go to the line tool, and off here, drag this one out like so, and then follow parallelism. Look to the right of my pointer, the parallel symbol appears. Make sure you get that click about halfway down, drag this one out, click, drag this one down at an angle, click, drag this across, and don't align it to the other one. Have it go in a little bit deeper. Click, drag this down parallel, and then close it at the base. Click. And it should turn this color. All right, so since we have most of the basics down, let's add some of the others. Middle click, let's drag that out, and let's go to dimension. Let's see what we have on the print. We see 2.25 overall, so from here to here, and then middle click right there, 2.25. Wow, that was actually really close. And then 0.25 from the base, so from here to here, middle click, 0.25. And then this from here to here, 0.25. Okay, now let's go back here. We have 0.375 from here to here. And then this is 0.25 from here to here. Now I realize now I made a mistake making this 1 inch. It actually needs to be half that, so 0.5, because we're only looking at 1/2 of this geometry. All right, so we have all the dimensions we need. we could go ahead and hit OK. Now you're probably wondering, why don't you put the fillet on there? Watch. Hit OK. I could have put it in as a sketch fillet, but we're going to learn sketch fillets coming up. All right, now there we have it. Hit OK. Go to the round, and let's set that round to, well, what is it? Print. It's a 1/2 inch in the print. So select this edge. And there it is. And the part's done. Go ahead and go to File, Save As, Save Backup, and locate your directory where you want to drop that. Hit OK. And that concludes exercise 3.